Welcome to Omnichannel Unpacked. My name is Ali Adrian. I am a Senior Product Marketing Manager here at ShipBob. And if you can't see my really cool shirt, we're excited because this is actually our 10-year anniversary week. We are thrilled to have reached 10 years. We're also excited to talk a little bit today about how far we've come and all the things that we are doing and our partners are supporting us on to help you reach your merchants and your customers anywhere you are, anywhere they are. So as people start coming in, please drop where you're tuning in from their chat. I am in sunny Miami, Florida. Thankfully, it is not raining today, which is awesome. We are really excited to get into the sessions today. We have experts from across our partner ecosystem here to share everything that you need to know about launching and scaling on any sales channel from TikTok Shop and Amazon to in-store at places like Target and Ulta. A few housekeeping items before we get started. We will be giving away prizes to attendees and asking questions throughout the day. So please stay active in that chat. Keep an eye on the chat so you can win one of those prizes. We will be announcing winners all day with the biggest prize announced after our last session. So it pays to stay. If you have any questions for our speakers after their session, please head over to the virtual booths tab to connect with them. There are some special offers and discounts over there, so definitely check those out. They also have a lot of fabulous material on their booths that you can click on and read and link out to. So with that, I am extremely excited to introduce our first session with our headline sponsor, Settle. So Chris Dittmer is here from Settle. Hi.
Hey, good morning, everybody.
Good morning. He is the head of sales over at Settle, and he's going to be sitting down with Achal Patel, who is the CEO and co-founder at Cabinet Health. Hello.
Good morning, everyone.
So for those of you who don't know about Cabinet, I'll drop the link in the chat for you to get familiar. They are actually a really cool, super cool, sustainable healthcare company on a mission to eliminate single-use plastic from medicine. You'll hear a lot about their company today, so I am going to turn it over to these two.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Let me go ahead and fire off the screen share. Okay, can everybody see? I think so. I'll take that as a yes. So excited to be here. Just so grateful for ShipBob for putting on the forum and to kick off today's slide. Also couldn't be more thrilled to be here with my guest. So let's dive in. We're here to chat about omnichannel, that big scary word that so ties into the dreams that I think brands have as they scale, but also points to a lot of complexity that they're keen to unpack how to navigate. Today, you've already been given the intro by Ali. For myself, my name is Chris. Let's talk a little bit about our guests. You've probably seen them online. Maybe you've seen their products in the CVS. Maybe you've even seen one of their gorgeous end cap displays in Target. Their ambition is to lead an industry to have sustainable healthcare products and services accessible to over 1 billion people by 2030. I'd love to introduce Achal, the founder and CEO of Cabinet Health. Achal, if you want to just say a couple of words or a couple sentences about yourself.
Absolutely, Chris. Thanks for the introduction. Good morning, everyone. My name is Achal. I also go by Ach, co-founder and CEO of a company called Cabinet Health. On a personal level, I'm a third-generation healthcare entrepreneur. Literally spent my childhood summers in a medicine factory and to have seen the insides of the healthcare supply chain, but also some of the challenges as a consumer that takes both over-the-counter and prescription allergy medicines. And so our mission at Cabinet is to eliminate single-use plastic from healthcare, starting with everyday medicines, and building an omni-channel brand and product is a really critical part of achieving that ambition. And so excited to talk more about that today and hopefully answer any questions as can be helpful.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thanks, Ach. And if anyone has any questions, if you want to put them in the chat, we can keep a parking lot. We'll have some dedicated time for Q&A at the end. And then you can always also find us in our virtual booth once the session concludes. But we know there's a lot of incredible content today. So please, if you have any questions, feel free to field them live. As I mentioned, my name is Chris. I'm the head of sales at Settle. In the past 18 months, my team has deployed hundreds of millions in non-dilutive working capital across the e-commerce and CPG landscape. If you haven't heard of Settle yet, I guarantee you will by the end of our short time together. But to start, let's talk more about Cabinet Health. So they're revolutionizing the way we engage with those little orange plastic bottles that, at least when I stop to think about it, they're really pretty ubiquitous in everybody's lifetime healthcare journey. And what I really loved about Cabinet is just that there's such a thoughtful, kind of serious approach that still has this like really engaging and playful form factor. They've been a partner of Settles for the past 4 years, launched in CVS last spring, and shortly thereafter in Target. Maybe just like starting globally, would love to hear like, Cabinet Health, like what about this like really seized you in the beginning and, made you know that this could be something you could put 100% of your grid against for the next 3, 5, 10 years?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I mentioned I grew up in the supply chain and saw firsthand just the massive environmental impact that the world of healthcare has on our planet. But really over the years, started to dig into understanding what is like the actual magnitude of that. And I think the thing that was a turning point for me personally was that about 6, 7 years ago, I started to learn that the healthcare industry produces over 190 billion plastic bottles every single year. Less than 5% of those are recycled, which means the rest of those end up in our oceans or landfills, incinerated into the air that we breathe. And over the last few years, we've seen increasing bodies of research showing that we're ingesting upwards of a credit card of microplastics every single week. Healthcare plastic waste is fundamentally a healthcare issue, as those microplastics are now being found in our bloodstream or lung tissue, the breast milk of mothers, and have been correlated with negative health outcomes ranging from increased risk of cardiovascular events all the way through to death. And so as a healthcare company, we have a fundamental responsibility to look at plastic waste as a healthcare issue. And our ambition is to lead the industry to accelerate its transition away from using plastic products to more sustainable alternatives.
Yeah, I think it's really like compelling how you're attacking it from both ends. The team has this, like you said, this fundamental responsibility that's woven into the company to tackle plastic waste from one end, but on the other hand, really tighten the connection between these everyday products that we engage with, prescription, over the counter, and just bring us closer to like, whatever that North Star is in our health journey. Can you tell me a little bit more about like strategy? Like at the outset, from a channel perspective, did you know that retail was always going to play a significant role, or was it something that, evolved more organically as the team started to build and you started to strategize?
The way that we look at the market and where our business goes is starting with understanding where are the pockets of plastic waste in the healthcare industry. So imagine your pharmacy, imagine your everyday retailer like Target, hospital systems, and beyond. And each of those are areas where there's healthcare plastic today. And for us, our business strategy has been oriented around how do we reduce the amount of plastic that's in each of those areas. And really directly, retail has always been an important lever to be able to accomplish our mission. 85% of consumers in the US still buy over-the-counter medicine in store at a retailer like Target or CVS and others. And so for us, retail was always part of the strategy. It was really just a matter of how and when. So we started our business 100% e-commerce, really focused on serving a customer base that was already bought into sustainable products and refillable systems in adjacent categories. We were able to build mass market brand awareness, start building revenue and consumer adoption through a direct consumer, as well as online marketplace channel. But for us, that was a stepping stone to building towards larger retail launches where we could make the product more accessible, more available for where consumers are buying these products every day. And then longer term, actually starting this year, for us, both of those represent case studies that allow us to show the industry what is possible when it comes to sustainable healthcare. You can have a mass market product that looks nice, that's sustainable, that's refillable, that's high quality, and less than the name brand. And for us, that's a beacon for what sustainable healthcare can be. And as we think about omnichannel for us, beyond just being a brand in retail, we also are starting to build out what we call our Powered by Cabinet capability, where we help transition massive pharmaceutical distributors, manufacturers, and retailers in their transition away from plastic, knowing that no matter how big we build our brand, it'll be a fraction of those 190 billion plastic bottles that the industry produces every single year.
Yeah, that's wild. It sounds like, you guys had a sort of like a map from the start that direct to consumer was going to be this great stepping stone that allowed us to tap, directly into a cohort that's already bought in to our sustainability mission. And maybe you could use that sort of as like a pipeline, not a proof of concept, but like you said, like case studies to show retailers what's possible, that they could emulate with their distribution.
Exactly.
Small plug for Settle before we chat a little bit more about the omnichannel challenges that brands face. Settle, we do one thing really well. We help inventory-based brands solve some of their stickiest problems. If you've ever ordered 9 of something, got billed for 12, but only received 8, comparably easy to find that data, keep track of your cash flow. And beyond that, we do offer working capital for brands that qualify anywhere from 50,000 to 10 million. We'll pay your suppliers. You can pay us back after you sell your goods, and it's non-dilutive. But moving away from Settle, let's talk about some of these challenges. Maybe like Cabinet, that your brand is destined for retail success, but direct to consumer is going to be where you start, and you're engaging those retailers. Can you, and some of these questions come up, like, maybe I'm killing it on Shopify, but moving to direct to consumer adds this whole new channel, this whole new dimension of complexity. I'm gonna have way more SKUs, way more channels. Even picking the retailers, did you do any research, Ach, before? Did you kind of have like your go-to list, or were there, how did you decide like which retailers you wanted to potentially pilot in? Did they reach out to you, or was it all outbound? Like sort of in the beginning stages, how did you, drill down on what channels you wanted to be in?
For us, it goes back to our overarching mission, which is if we want to eliminate single-use plastic in healthcare, let's partner with the organizations that we think will be the biggest catalyst to enabling that. So as we look at the market, CVS is the biggest drugstore in the US. They're also an insurer, they're also a PBM. Target has a historical track record of launching consumer brands better than most retailers. And then we actually have a third partner in McKesson on the B2B side, who's the largest pharmaceutical distributor in the US. And so as we think about the partners that we selected, they were the ones that were right for Cabinet. Those aren't going to be the right partners for other brands based on your strategy. And a lot of folks actually asked us, like, hey, as you think about launching, like, why is CVS your first retail partner? And for us, it's because, we had mission alignment with them. They have clear publicly stated goals around plastic reduction in healthcare. They have a massive ability to influence where the healthcare industry moves. And for us, that was an important thing in terms of choosing our partners. Target, I think, is a more obvious one for folks in the audience, where they've had a track record of launching a lot of direct consumer brands into retail. They're really good at nurturing and growing brands. And for us, we built a really strong partnership with them over a couple of years, actually, before launching. Chris, to your question, we reached out to CVS and Target proactively. Some of our other partners have come more organically through existing folks that we know. But overall, it's definitely in both cases been a co-creation of how do we bring sustainable healthcare to market? How do we make it so that it's a flavor that works for the retailer? And how do we think about our products or SKUs, where we're placed in the store, our pricing strategy together to be successful within that retailer, within that channel?
Yeah, it sounds like it was pretty comprehensive. And you guys were thinking about it, not just where could their, massive distribution help you over the next 6, 12, 18 months, but on the longer time horizon. Where are some of these players going to be much bigger unlocks? Like you spoke about CVS's role as a PBM and insurer. I'm curious, like, were investors helpful? Like, did they, were they your champions? Were they excited? Did any of them actively recommend, a different strategy that just felt like it didn't sort of ran against the grain of what Cabinet Health was trying to do?
Yeah, I'll share a couple of perspectives. One is that we're really lucky to have investors that are incredibly supportive of our long-term mission and strategy. It's, we picked partners that I think believe in the same things that we do, which is really important. And as part of that, one of our largest investors, called Natureza, They focus on better for you consumer brands, and they have retail expertise. Part of why we brought them on as investors is that my co-founder Russ and I had never built and launched a consumer brand. We never launched in retail. And we had heard a lot of stories of mistakes that were made along the way that we knew we weren't going to avoid completely, but we could at least have a more informed perspective from building a network of other founder peers around us or investors that had launched in retail, had learned from mistakes, and wanted to share some of those with us. And so to your question, one of the things that we really partnered closely with our investor group on is, how do we think about SKUs that we want to launch in retailers? How do we think about door count in a way that's thoughtful? How do we think about our capitalization strategy to be successful in retail and build that into our actual retail strategy versus having them live as separate items? And that last point I would say is really critical, particularly in today's environment where equity dollars, particularly into consumer brands, have decreased considerably. The cost of debt is increasing commensurate with interest rates. And so if you're entering retail and you're not thinking cash conversion cycles, you're not thinking capitalization strategy to be successful, you're on a path to run into a brick wall probably at some point, candidly. And so for us, we were really fortunate that we had investors that didn't think about our growth in retail as just add as many doors as possible, but we're really advocating for a crawl, walk, run strategy where start with a certain number of SKUs and a certain number of retail doors, learn from that, know that the packaging is going to need to change, the SKUs are going to need to change, incorporate those learnings, and then launch in a more thoughtful way and scale methodically versus going in with saying, let's do 3,000 doors in this retailer and like go all in, knowing that there are things that we'll learn that are just hard to figure out through focus groups, through building an online brand, that the realities of retail have taught us. I'll share an anecdote where there was a time where actually I had a conversation with one of our board members who's advocating for smaller number of SKUs, smaller number of doors. And, we landed on a decision where I actually said, we have this opportunity to go to more doors in CVS, more SKUs. We think we want to take it. Here's like the financial investment required to do that. And we were both aligned. We went in with a unified front to do that. And retrospectively, I think that was a mistake. Like we actually ended up doing more doors than I think we should have out the gate, more SKUs than we should have. But we learned from that and we adapted those learnings into our launch with Target. And now we're better for it. What I'll share is like we were lucky in that, both lucky and a little bit thoughtful, I would say, in understanding the potential risk of that. And we're prepared to be able to withstand that if things didn't go to plan.
Yeah, I love it. What you're painting the picture for brands, you're going to have your known unknowns and your unknown unknowns. So on the known unknowns, that equity dollars are going down, cost of borrowing is going up, and you have to be really thoughtful about what's your approach, door count, SKUs. The more you can de-risk that expansion from the outset, the better your brand's going to do. But you're also still painting a nice picture of like, what are those potholes along the way? It's okay to make mistakes. You might be aspirational about door count or SKU, but it sounds like you maybe had a couple of off ramps already planned in case things got too hairy from a supply chain or door count perspective. So just really minding all of the angles. Would love to dig into a little bit more about some of the questions here too. Like, brands, that's what we hear. How am I going to pay for this order? What's the operational complexity? And how can I learn from my community who have done this before to help avoid common pitfalls? Those are the three key areas: forecasting, paying for that inventory, and then operational complexity. And we know what happens, right? If you over order, you have a bunch of inventory sitting in a warehouse and your cash flow is tied up. And if you under order, you've got stockouts and you're scrambling to get a supplier to ship their goods as fast as possible. I really seized on what you were talking about with approach on like a little bit more thoughtful crawl, walk, run on door count. Can you tell me like a little bit more about that? Like, it sounds like you wanted to be really intentional with scaling how many doors you were in and the methodical expansion. Why was that so important internally for brands that might think, no, I want to get in front of as many doors as possible?
I think the first broader theme related to that is one of learning in retail. And then the second broader theme is around cash flow. So on the first theme, we had a perspective of what our retail ready packaging, as we called it, needed to be. We were selling online where you have an opportunity to educate a consumer around your product through an ad, a landing page, like the checkout flow, which for a problem like plastic waste in healthcare was really important for us to be able to build an understanding of why the purchase is so important of a transition in a consumer or a patient's life. In retail, you don't have that opportunity. You have 3 to 5 seconds, as most people would tell you, to be able to communicate, like, what is this product? Like, why should I buy it? And why should I buy it now? And doing that in a category that in particular hasn't seen much innovation for 50 years in over-the-counter medicine was certainly and still is an uphill battle. And so when it comes to picking a smaller number of doors, a smaller number of SKUs, part of what if I could go back and do again, I would do is actually realize that like the packaging that we go into retail with like is going to change. Like that is a reality. We did a number of consumer focus groups. We did in-store studies. We did online research. We did everything that people advised us to do. And as soon as we were in store and live for a few weeks, we already started to see things that could be improved, or just spending time in CVS stores and seeing customers literally just walk by an end cap because they're like, I'm going to the allergy aisle. I'm not shopping for my over-the-counter medicine on an end cap in CVS. And so the benefit of smaller door counts, smaller SKUs is that it makes that learning less painful, and it makes those learning cycles, I think, more nimble, where you can roll out packaging changes to additional SKUs that you're bringing in without it feeling like a massive sunk cost. And that, I think, leads into the second point around why crawl, walk, run is really important, is from a cash flow perspective, the cash conversion cycles in retail are just much, much more extended than an e-commerce business in terms of the lead times that you have for not just the manufacturing of your product, but getting it into retailer distribution centers. Typically for us, that's like 6 to 8 weeks before the product hits shelf at launch. And then also dealing with the net terms of the retailer, you're pretty quickly talking about 3 to 5 months of additional cash conversion that you wouldn't have in an e-commerce business. And the greater you scale the business, the greater the actual pure dollar amount that cash conversion cycle is. And so if you're launching in 200 doors with one SKU and your cash outlay to do that is $200,000, that might be manageable for some brands. But if you're all of a sudden doing 10 SKUs in 1,000 doors, you're talking about a multiplier effect of 25x on that. And you're all of a sudden going from $2 million to $5 million of cash outlay. And I think the lesson learned for us is have a really good understanding, first and foremost, of what that cash conversion cycle is for your brand. Every company will be different, right? So understand what that is, and then understand how SKU strategy and door count impacts that cash conversion cycle and the amount of cash you need to be able to sustain that retail launch. I would actually look at retail strategy and financial strategy needing to be heavily integrated. That's something that we're doing now that I wish we had done more actively 18 months ago.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Like going back to the crawl, walk, run, I heard two things, that you knew that there was a pretty comprehensive education portion of the customer journey and that you could best accomplish that on your own channels. And like you said, in retail, maybe you have 5 seconds. So making sure that you could accomplish one on the direct to consumer without, necessarily lacking conversion in retail because customers don't know about the product, aren't educated about why it's better or different, really helped you guys like leverage that educational component so that retail wasn't left trying to why Cabinet Health is great. And on the other side, the packaging piece was really interesting, right? Like just what you said, no number of focus groups or product research ahead of time is going to change what you learn from your first day or week of being in store. So redundancy on the packaging supply chain and just not over ordering whatever that beautiful package is that you're going to launch in retail. Some great points being brought up too about cash conversion cycle and just how lumpier and more concentrated the cash that retail expansion is going to require will be. That's what we hear from brands. For the audience today, when you're thinking about the forecasting piece of your omnichannel expansion, there's going to be a lot more variability, right? Just as Ash said, your orders are going to get larger. The cash flow is going to get a lot lumpier. Outside of having minimums to adhere to in a retail environment, it's going to be hit or miss if retailers are going to provide the kind of guidance over the sell-through that you can expect. So would love to, hear a little bit, like on the forecasting or inventory side, how did you guys prepare? Like, did you reach out to vendors to start getting better terms in place, explore secondary packaging providers? Or when you're thinking about shoring up supply chain from an inventory perspective, like, did you guys make any changes, or did you feel pretty good with the set of suppliers that you had that were supporting your direct channel?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the first thing that we did was acknowledge that we're a bit out of our league as founders in terms of retail launches and the operations around it. And so one of the most important philosophies Russ, my co-founder, and I had was build people around us that have launched brands in retail, that understand what's required to do that. And so our head of operations, Wes, had previously launched brands in retailers, both grocery chains, national retailers, local retailers, you name it. And his body of work was really focused on how do we look through our supply chain partners, figure out which ones are set up to support us in our retail launch, add redundancy, and then build a distribution network that works well for retail as well. One of the things I think a lot of brands will realize is that 3PLs, third-party logistics providers that are built for direct-to-consumer e-commerce might not always be the right partners as you move into retail. And so for us, we had a very specialized 3PL focused on direct-to-consumer, and we ended up actually adding a retail-specific fulfillment center to be able to meet the needs of the business as we launch in CVS, Target, and beyond. And so there's a natural evolution and maturation of the supply chain that happens that is a really critical part of making sure that we can fulfill orders in full, on time, regularly with our supply chain.
Yeah, that makes sense. Adding that redundancy and making sure to find suppliers who specialize in retail fulfillment or logistics, it's not going to be the same as suppliers who are really good at direct to consumer. I am keeping an eye on time. I know we have a ton of amazing speakers ahead. For the beginning outset from a forecasting perspective, I do want to just share, it's okay to start tracking in spreadsheets. You can graduate to more advanced tools, but in the beginning, spreadsheets are probably going to be enough for your team. And on that cash conversion cycle, that's something critical we want to make sure the audience leaves understanding. Adding retail as a new channel is not only going to lengthen your cash conversion cycle, right? The inflows are going to take longer, the outflows are going to get larger, and be more variable. We love direct to consumer because it's incredible how quickly you can realize revenue in your bank at a high margin, but you can't match the distribution of retail. And so what we see a lot of brands struggling with is that extended cash flow conversion cycle really puts them into a liquidity crunch. Would love to hear a little bit before we go into that example. How did you guys prepare for that? Like, did you feel literate on types of debt that you would need to find, or was it like a whole brave new world?
It was, for us, it was certainly a new world. I don't have a finance or accounting background, but we had made the mistake of not preparing for extended cash conversion cycles before. And so I think my recommendation on how not to make that mistake is really understand like what this visual looks like for your company. Candidly, for ours, it's much longer than this. When we talk about lead times and net terms up to like net 60 with retailers, some of those cash conversion cycles can expand to 6-7 months. And so I think ultimately it's about just understanding what is that cycle for your company, and then what are you capitalized to be able to support as it pertains to that.
Awesome, man. I know it looks like we ran out of time. I apologize, guys, but we had some great content today. Let me zoom to the end. We'll be in the waiting room, but we really appreciate everyone's attendance today, and thank you.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for joining us today. Achal, it's so cool to see how you guys are revolutionizing sustainable healthcare. I've dropped a link again for their team in the chat. If you want to connect with the Settle team, you can head over to the virtual booths tab and enter their booth and chat with them and see all the fun stuff they've got on their page. But we will see you all in our next session. Thank you.
Thank you,
Take
Ali.
care.
Thank you, Ash.
Thanks, Chris.